Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com here. Here is not my shop, but instead you're in my apartment. Yeah, believe it or not, we have now moved out of the house. We're trying to get things done still at the house, but we are officially in the apartment. So this is a special episode. The only reason that I'm recording here is because I want to do something a little bit different with you tonight. Actually, two different somethings. First, I want to talk with you a little bit about a contest and kind of a special occasion that has just taken place. And then I want to go into a little bit of the history of the patents that belong to Shopsmith and how U.S. patents work. It's kind of interesting, and I've gotten a bunch of messages over the years from people saying, I saw a Total Shop or I saw some other clone, and how did they get away with copying the Shopsmith tools so faithfully? Well, in addition to talking specifically about that, I would like to talk with you about how U.S. patents work and make you that much more knowledgeable on that topic. But first, special event. Yesterday, I think, we hit 5,000 subscribers. So I'm super excited about that. Each and every one of you are important to me. I'm so glad to have you here. And that's a pretty big number, especially for such a little niche channel such as mine. So thank you for being here. And I didn't want this to go unrecognized. So part of my thinking is I want to do a little bit of a drawing. In our midweek follow-up, I'm going to do a drawing from all of the channel members and anybody who is subscribed and comments on this video. So be sure if you haven't clicked the subscribe button to go ahead and do that. But if you happen to be a channel member and you're seeing this video late and you realize that you didn't subscribe, don't sweat it. Channel members are in the pot. And what am I going to draw for? You know, just a couple of my favorite things. I thought that might be nice to give out to some of you some of the things that I use in my shop. So I'll do that drawing midweek. Now, this is a very exciting week for me because I'm traveling on business. This is the first business trip I've taken in over a year. And normally I was traveling about half of my time. So I will be doing my follow-up from my hotel room in Minneapolis. So that'll be fun. So let's talk about U.S. patents, just to give you a little bit of my credibility on this topic, which isn't much. But for about 10 years or so, my wife and I ran an e-commerce business where we sold prints of U.S. patents. It used to be it was pretty difficult to search for patents. You either had to have the patent number or some very specific key details to go into the U.S. Patent Office search, especially if the patent had been applied for prior to 1974. Well, some of the most interesting patents happened before 1974. So we got quite adept at searching the patent office, and it was kind of a hobby of mine. I studied the patents, and I just particularly old tools. That probably comes as a big surprise to you. And while we were homeschooling our daughter, my wife said to me on a vacation, she said, I would love to find something to do from home to contribute to the family and something as a bit of a hobby as well. And I suggested, I said, why don't you take some of those patents that I've found, some of the more interesting ones, and clean them up because they're pretty messed up. They get scanned on high-speed copiers, and they're being scanned by federal employees who may or may not care about their job. And sometimes they're crooked, sometimes they're pixelated. And she would take those and digitally clean up those images and then print them on parchment. And she sold them through eBay and she sold them through our website. And then everything changed when Google started digitizing and helping the U.S. Patent Office digitize. And not just digitize, but actually kind of map those documents and making them searchable. So maybe you don't know the name of the inventor. Maybe you don't know the name of the company the inventor worked for, but you could come up with some key words like, bandsaw tracking or something like that. suddenly it became possible to search for those things. So let's just talk about some of the basics of U.S. patents. The whole idea behind the patent system, if you will, is to spur innovation and to protect inventors. So the idea is you would, in exchange for disclosing what is unique and novel about your invention, you would gain some protection against copies. As a result of this, my gosh, the innovation that has sprung out of the United States in the last couple hundred years is phenomenal. So instead of just keeping things to ourselves, we say, okay, you got my back, here's my secret. Now, knowing that, a lot of folks assume that when they look at a patent, that everything that they see is protected by patent. That is usually not the case. So let's go to this website I'm recommending to you. I'll share my screen. Okay, so here's what we're looking at. We're looking at a website that looks very much like Google, but you'll notice it says Google Patents. Now, I don't know why they did this, but the URL for this is not Google Patents. It's patents.google.com. Don't know why. But we can search the name of an inventor. We can search the name of a company. We can search a product. Typically, you can't search a brand name, but you and I are familiar with Shopsmith. Let's type Shopsmith in here because Shopsmith was a manufacturer. Shopsmith. And here you can see it automatically threw that name not into the inventor column, but into the assignee column. An assignee is a company that perhaps gets licensed the use of the patent or owns the patent outright. If somebody working at Shopsmith under their employee invents something, that person is named as the inventor, but really the company owns that invention. So typically with Google, we can search and then sort. And so we might sort from oldest to newest. Let's do that. And you can see that's 1982, John Legler, Jack as I knew him. You can see there's the patent for the Mark V mounted planer. Now let's explore this information and maybe dispel a myth or two. First off, the duration of a U.S. patent has changed over the years, but at one point you had maintenance fees, and if you didn't pay your maintenance fee, your patent couldn't be extended for a few more years. And finally, they knocked all that off. It was just a hassle. Plus, they wanted to standardize that with what was being done around the world for the most part. So now patents are 20 years long. But what's interesting, if you look at this says December 4th, date patented December 4th, 1984. But that's not when the 20 years began. The 20 years begin upon the date of filing. So that means that this patent was expired and became public domain in 2002. Anybody, and I mean anybody, could produce this planer exactly as it appears here, and they would have the right to do so. You could do this because this product is now in the public domain, assuming that there were no new innovations that were themselves patented. All right, so here I can see there's the inventor. Oh, and it's not just John Legler. It's also Michael Duell of Columbus, Ohio. It was assigned to Shopsmith, and this says the term at that date was only 14 years. So I take that back, what I said about 20. It's 20 now, but apparently it was 14 here. Now there's some other information. What you see here are some earlier patents that you might say inspired this product. It may be that those guys never saw these patents before in their life, but the attorney went looking and found these patents and said, you know what? This product is similar to these previous products. And so you can make a note of these parts here or these patent numbers and go check them out. This is really how we began to dig deep into finding interesting patents, because some of the earlier ones you'll find were maybe for Delta products or others that you might be familiar with. But you continue to scroll down. Oh, by the way, this is a design patent. So there are really three different kinds of patents in the US. There is the most common one you and I think of is actually a utility patent. That means it is on a unique item that's being produced, and it can be on how you make the product or something unique about that product. Okay, so that's a utility patent. Then we have a design patent. It's specifically how something looks. Nothing about this patent is going to talk about the cutter head or the way the variable speed works or any of that. It's not going to disclose much at all. It's just the general looks of this machine. So we'll get through the pictures pretty quickly, and here you can see illustrations of what that product looks like. Then we get into the actual patent description. Oh, no, we're done. We are done with this because, again, it's just a design patent. We need to get out of this one and go look at a utility patent. So let's see, planar chip removal. So one of the things that I can do is I can click on any one of these images, and if I choose to, I can biggie size that image. And maybe I'm going to see what I want to see here, maybe not. What I prefer to do is to click on the download the PDF, and that's what I did a moment ago. And then now we can look all the way through this patent. All right, looks like the same illustrations, but now we're getting into the meat of how this planer works. Look, you even saw that mounted on a Mark V. Ooh, look at that. I can rotate the view here. There we go, which will make it all look upright. You've seen in some of my videos where I've shared an illustration from a patent. This is exactly how I did it. Took a screenshot of it normally. Look at that, showing the direction of feed. Cutter head spinning that direction. You can see the arrows. You can see how the wedges work and so on. Really interesting bits and pieces. Rotate that again. You might also make note of the fact that they call out this figure, and the figures then get spelled out in the patent itself. So let's get down to where we get into the text of the patent. Oh yeah, that old crank. I forgot about that crank. Oh, look at that. This is the old manual feed that they had as an option when they first launched the Mark V mounted planer. Oh my goodness, this is a walk in history. All right, here's how the switch box works. I've mentioned to people in the past that inside of that switch box, there's a switch, a mechanical switch, and you basically have a plastic plunger that moves up and down and flips that toggle switch. And if you happen to lose your key, there's the key right there. All you have to do is stick your hex wrench into that hole and depress the little button, and you'll be able to raise and lower the on-off switch. All right, now we get into the patent, and here's where things get interesting. Background of the invention. This is just a little story that the company or the individual tells you about, here's what other planers do, and here's the problem with other planers, and this is what I'm trying to do. So look, the disadvantage of motorized planers, which utilize jack screws for elevating the tables, is the jack screw must be oriented vertically within the interior chamber and parallel to each other with high precision. And it just explains why they made this patent. All right, then we'll start seeing they'll call out the summary of the invention. They'll start calling out those individual figures to tell you, here's what's happening here, here's what's happening over there. I'm trying to find a reference to the word figure. Oh, here we go. Figure 1, explaining what you see in Figure 1, what's happening in Figure 2, calling out individual components, and so on. Now, here's what's interesting. So far, none of this is the patent. None of this really is telling you if you are thinking about copying this or thinking about you're a manufacturer, do I need to buy the rights to this patent from Mr. Legler or not? Basically, you have to get down to what's called the claims. So I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Feed mechanism, switch box. Goodness gracious. All right, what is claimed? So here is what is claimed about this planer. From here to here, and then we're done. Isn't that amazing? These are the elements of this planer that are patented. Now remember, we saw the design patent, so they covered their bases. So the looks of a planer couldn't look like that. And here's an explanation of really what is unique about this planer. Isn't that crazy? So a lot of folks will look at a patent and go, oh, I guess they've got this all sewn up. There's no way I can copy this, when in fact, maybe not. Look, so there's a patent for the planer table assembly, the planer mounter system, and so on. The featherboard, the push stick, the push block, the fence straddler, all of these things that we've talked about in our videos together. The tilting table for a woodworking tool, and so on. Oh, here's something interesting. Support frame for a power tool. Shopsmith never produced this. So look at that. It's a base that is multi-height. We've all said, gosh, I wish the lathe were higher, or I wish the table saw were lower. This particular patent allows that to happen. You turn, let's see, is it that knob? No, the knob on the end, very similar to how the Mark 7 disconnects and allows us to tilt it both directions. But what happens is when you turn this, it pulls a pin here and a pin here, and then you can lift this end up and it engages another set of holes. So you do one end and then the other. Also, what's interesting about this is, like the Mark 7, it does tilt both ways. So, you know, kind of some of the essence of this continues on in the Mark 7. Let's see, there's a really interesting part here that shows how this thing moves, but here's one location of that pin, here's a location of that pin. You'll notice that those holes are not in perfect alignment. And why would that be? Well, that be because when you loosen it and raise it up, you're pivoting on the other end, and so it's moving up in an arc to that hole, which means on the other end, it's got to be the same way. Let's take a look. Oh, that's shown in another patent. This is the design patent. I know these patents, so that's why. Let's go. Table assembly, is that it? No, that's a table assembly. Headstock. Now, we're not going to look at that. Oh, yeah. Oh, there it is. Headstock elevating apparatus. This is it. Yeah, look at that, showing how you would lift one side up and lock it, and then the other side up and lock it. I don't know why they never came to market with this. It's such an interesting idea. Here we go. We're showing how it's got to move up at an angle, click into place, and then that one will move up at an angle and click into place. So check this out. Here's a new headstock design that was never produced Diggy size that up a little bit. So you can see how they came up with the cover here for the drive hubs on the side and a totally different switch. This was all a part of the thinking that eventually led to not the Power Pro, but what do they call that? The C headstock, where they moved the switch from directly over the center of the speed control and moved it off to the left. Canada was requiring that the switch had to move. It had to be further away from the overhang of the table. And when the Mark V Model 510 was introduced, the table got too big and therefore the switch was being covered. So they were requiring movement of the switch. And so while they were at it, Shopsmith considered a whole new design for the headstock. Never came to market. What else do we have here? There's the dust chute for the 510, the fence, the miter gauge, anti-kickback, lathe duplicator, the dust collector, the power station, the biscuit joiner. There should be 2 patents for the biscuit joiner on here. The scroll saw, the speed increaser, the speed reducer will be in here. Let's take a look at that speed increaser, by the way, because that is also interesting. Let's get to where we can get a good view of it. So here's the quill on the headstock. Here it is coupled onto a kind of a drive hub that you attach, which then plugs into and powers this, which is a water pump bearing assembly. That water pump bearing assembly is just like the lower shaft on a Mark V. And then here is what is basically a faceplate. They have a cast iron disc that was produced in the shape of the faceplate, but it was much more precision and balanced because of the speeds it was going to attain. And then onto that, there is clamped a little thin piece of plastic. It's a special kind of plastic. It reminds me of the lid of like a Cool Whip container. And that rubs against a surface that you can't see in this illustration. Let me find it. Better view. Oh, there's not a better view of it. Well, but what you have here is you have a shaft that will accept router bits or a shaper arbor. And then you've got that shaft that's got a bearing here and a bearing here. And right behind this, there's kind of a bulbous shape on that shaft that rubs against that disc. And so as that disc is spinning around, it rubs against that little wheel on the shaft, and that makes it turn 90 degrees and increases the speed. The engineer that designed this actually got the idea from a lawnmower. There was a Lazy Boy lawnmower that had some kind of a variable speed self-propel, and that's where he got the inspiration for that. Now, this is all well and good, but none of these are those old patents. And I told you that, I originally was searching for old patents prior to 1972 or 74. How do you find those? Well, let's go back to the home page, and maybe we search by inventor. So we know Hans Goldschmidt was the inventor, and he, along with 2 partners, started the company Magna Engineering. And Magna Engineering sold the original Shopsmith tools, the 10ER, and then eventually the Mark V. So now there's welding in 1899. None of these are the Hans Goldschmidt we're looking for, right? So we can sort these again. We can go backwards from the newest ones, 1994, or perhaps we can put a search term. How about machine? Whoops. And now let's sort again from oldest. clicked the wrong button again. 1947 multi-purpose machine. Convertible material woodworking machine. That's going to be it right there. So there is the 10ER, H. Goldschmidt. Patent was filed in August of 1947. Here's an example of what I was saying, how my wife was taking these and cleaning them up. They didn't crop this properly, and they had a piece of tape on there and pretty pixelated. And so she would clean all that up before printing them on parchment. Now, what's interesting about these patent illustrations is they're oftentimes the earliest ideas of the product, and they don't actually look like this when they come to market. And that's perfectly allowable within the whole patent process. Look at that. I just love these pictures. And there you can see Hans Goldschmidt. There is no assignee here. So he patented this before Magna Engineering was invented. So if you would have searched Magna Engineering, you would never have found this patent, right? Kind of interesting. Now, one other thing that Google did was they digitized all of that text and put it down here and made that, this is where all that information is that we were able to then search. So everything that's contained within that is here. And what is also interesting is, remember how in the patent we showed other patent numbers that this product was maybe inspired by? Well, Google makes our searching even easier, because what they did at the very bottom is they made these hyperlinks. So now I can go directly to these. Let's see if there's any names here that we recognize. Well, there's Porter Cable, 1941. Let's open that one in a new tab and take a look at that machine. See if it's anything we recognize. No, look at that. It's a circular saw. Let's spin that around here. A circular saw that's mounted onto a movable arm. So it's turning that circular saw into a radial arm saw. Not at all like the 10ER, but there's something about this that maybe an inspector at the patent office might have considered close enough that we're not going to allow you to have that patent, Mr. Goldschmidt. Additionally, if we go on down, these are patents that have come since the 10ER that cited Hans's patent as perhaps being earlier art. Oh, look at that. Magna Engineering Corp. Circular Saw Work Support Table, 1947. So now it's another 10ER patent that came along a little bit later and was granted to Magna. Let's open that one up. And there you can see it is a patent on the table and the table support. What else do we have? Let's see if there's any other names. Yuba. So Yuba is the company that eventually bought Magna Engineering. So let's open that one up. This could be the Mark II. This is the Mark V. Okay, so there's your Mark V patent. Download that. And I've used pictures of this in some of my videos as well, showing it with the jointer. The jointer was never patented, although a similar version of a jointer was patented. But you can see there's the old Gilmer drive, the original one. This goes into showing a little bit of how the clutch used to work. They got rid of the clutch when they went to the Poly V drive. You can see there's a single bearing on this quill, not a double bearing quill. There's a water pump bearing assembly. These pictures are fantastic. There's how the speed control works. showing a little bit of the jigsaw on it, but not going into any detail because the jigsaw is not covered in this patent. Look at that, how the miter gauge works, or sorry, the rip fence works. And then let's go back here. And you got Yuba apparatus for raising and lowering the table. That would be on the Mark V as well, and so on. Isn't this fun? So, let's go back to that patent real quick, back to the Mark V, and let me point something else out to you. Let's biggie size this. Who is listed at the top of this? It's not Hans Goldschmidt. It's John W. Edgemond. One of these days, and I've mentioned him a couple times, we need to go into detail on Mr. Edgemond, but he was an engineer who was hired by Magna Engineering to work with Hans Goldschmidt to improve the machine and basically to add safety to the machine. The 10ER had an exposed pulley or series of pulleys and belts. And with the Mark V, they enclosed all of that and made it variable speed. Well, that was all Mr. Edgemond. So we can drop Hans's name from this and add John W. Edgemond. And if I click right there, it'll tell me, are there other iterations of his name? There are. Oh, look, Hans Goldschmidt and John Edgemond. Let's click on that and see what we get. Get rid of machine here. Combination power tool. Combination power tool. Now let's just make that John Edgemond. Aircraft construction, dado blade. There is the Magna Dado. Cherry orienter. Check this out. A jointer planer. Now you and I know that some people call jointers jointer planers, but this is really a jointer planer. Let's flip this over. And many of the elements of the Shopsmith jointer are incorporated into this design. But something that makes this totally different is you run your board across the top to use it as a jointer. You run it underneath on this table to use it as a planer. To my knowledge, this tool was never produced. In fact, this shows not using the standard Shopsmith jointer approach with the tapered blade and the wedges. This is a very traditional approach to mounting the blades. And this predates any joiner that Shopsmith ever produced. In fact, there's a version of this shown in the patent where you could mount this tool on the 10ER. You see, that's what we're showing here. Or it could be mounted on its own freestanding stand. Look at that. I would love to find one of these if it was actually ever prototyped. Let me know. If you live in California, there might be one floating around somewhere. Anyway, we can continue to look. John Edgemond, here's a design patent. There's the belt sander. There's blade tracking on the bandsaw. Headstock for the Mark V. Tilting table, more bandsaw, rip fence for the table saw, and so on and so on. Sliding table, table saw. I own one of these. This was produced by Magna. I take it back. I do not have the sliding table version. This one, I don't know if it was ever produced. The entire tabletop would slide, kind of radial arm saw style. Kind of sort of like the Shopsmith 2000, but not, because that one the blade moves. This one the blade is fixed. But they did design from this, or took from this, a design that became part of the the Magna Power Line, they called it. And they made that as a stand, a freestanding stand that looks just like the Pro Planer stand or the SPT stand. And they also made one that had a wider base that you could mount the joiner on one end and the table saw on the other. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing this. I could go all night long, and I'm sure that I've lost. Well, if you're hearing me say this, I didn't lose you. This stuff is just fun, and patents are fascinating. Um, the Shopsmith lineage, it went from Magna Engineering. It was then, as I mentioned, sold to Yuba. Yuba sold it to some investors who were employees of the company, and they started the company Magna American. And then that's the company that went out of business for a while back in the 60s. And then John Folkerth brought the company back to life in the 1970s. And that was the very first time that the company was called Shopsmith. The product was always called Shopsmith, but the company was first called Shopsmith, I believe, in 1974. And then Shopsmith itself went out of business a number of years ago and was replaced by John Folker's son, Robert, I believe. Yeah, it's Robert Folkerth. His initials RLF are the name of the company, RLF Shop, and they continue on today. All right, so we're going to cut it off here. If you have any questions, comments, cheap shots, remember you need to leave a comment here if you're not a channel member to be involved in the drawing in the midweek episode, and I hope you join me then. Make it a great week, and I'll see you.